Hi everyone, let's explore this job order costing problem that relates to a professional services organization. I'll read the problem. You see it at the top of the screen. Geller Engineering Consultants is a firm of professional civil engineers. It mostly does surveying jobs for the heavy construction industry throughout Texas. The firm obtains its jobs by giving fixed price quotations, so profitability depends on the ability to predict the time required for the various subtasks on the job. Now, this situation is similar to that in the auditing profession, where times are budgeted for such audit steps as reconciling cash and confirming accounts receivable. A client may be served by various professional staff members who hold positions in the hierarchy, from partners to managers to senior engineers to assistants. In addition, there are secretaries and other employees. Geller Engineering has the following budget for 2000X1, and you see the budget in front of you. Compensation of professional staff is $2,700,000. Other costs $283,500. So the total budgeted cost is $2,983,500. All right, so let's explore the first requirement. Here's what it says. The firm applies overhead to jobs at a budgeted percentage of the professional compensation charged directly to the job. Okay, and that's the ones that are charged directly to the job we're referring to as direct labor. For all categories of professional personnel, chargeable hours average 65% of available hours. Non-chargeable hours are regarded as additional overhead. And the first requirement says, what's the overhead rate as a percentage of direct labor? The chargeable professional compensation cost. Okay, and here's how we approach this. If you see on the screen right here, we see that it says, since the firm applied overhead to jobs at a budgeted percentage of direct labor, we must divide the total budgeted overhead dollars by the budgeted direct labor dollars to determine the budgeted overhead rate. Total overhead will include the other costs in addition to the non-chargeable labor cost. Now, remember that chargeable hours average 65% of available hours, so non-chargeable hours must amount to 35%, right? 100% less the 65% of the available hours. And if we use this information, we can determine the total budgeted indirect labor cost. So if I slide this out of the way, we'll see that we can figure out that the indirect compensation is $945,000. We take $2,700,000 of the compensation of the staff times the percentage not directly charged to the client, which was 35%. That gets us $945,000 as the indirect compensation labor. Okay, now I've slid the image on the screen so that you can see the next step. It says, now calculate the estimated overhead. Well, we're going to take the $945,000 that we just calculated here as the indirect compensation. We're going to add in the $283,000 of indirect cost, which was given right here in the original information in the problem, and that comes up to total overhead of $1,228,500. Okay, now I've moved the screen again so that we can continue to work on this problem. So right here it says we've determined total budgeted overhead. That's the $1,228,500. But we still need to know our budgeted direct labor cost to calculate the budgeted overhead rate. We can use total compensation, which means the labor, that labor amount given, as well as the 65% chargeable rate to estimate total direct labor costs for the year. So we take the compensation of the professional staff times the percentage directly charged to clients, and that's the direct compensation. Okay, so sliding down to show you what that looks like, we have $2,700,000 of the compensation of the professional staff times the 65% charged to clients, so $1,755,000 given right there is the total compensation, the labor amount. Okay, so next we need to go ahead and determine the overhead application rate for 2000X1 by dividing the total budgeted overhead by the budgeted direct labor cost. Okay, and you see that amount here. We use the 1,228,500 total overhead that we calculated here divided by the direct labor cost that we calculated right there. And we come up with the overhead rate of 70%. Okay, so let's move on to requirement 2. You see the screen has moved a little bit for you now. And I'll read requirement 2, which you see right here in about the middle of the screen. A senior engineer works 48 weeks per year, 40 hours per week. His compensation is $76,800. He has worked on 2 jobs during the past week, 26 hours to job 156 and 14 hours to job 183. How much cost should be charged to job 156 because of the work there? Now, to solve this one, you have to remember that the cost of each job will include the cost of direct labor in addition to the overhead charge of 70% of his direct labor. And then you'll use the information given to determine the hourly rate of the senior engineer that worked on the job. So let's go ahead and complete that calculation to help us determine the total cost of job 156. Now, I think we need this information that you see on the screen here to solve that one. He worked 26 hours, and we have to calculate the hourly rate, but we don't have that. Well, we can certainly calculate it. $76,800 was his compensation given here, right? And he typically works 40 hours per week, 48 weeks a year. So if we multiply 40 times 48 and divide the 76,800 divided by that, we get $40. And you can see the calculation here is 76,800 divided by 40 times 48. Okay, so that's how we come up with the $40 that gets used here. 26 hours worked on job 156 times 40 gives us 1,040 of the direct labor charge to job 156. Then we add in the overhead charge, right, which should be 70% of that amount. We come up with 1,768.